In our modern world, we are raised to consider death as the opposite of life. One day we'll die. We try to avoid death. We work hard to affirm life against death, to postpone death. Some of us will go as far as imagining that there is no such thing as death. Death is simply transformation, and we just keep on living in other forms. Life, a kind of dream. We go through changes, and death is simply part of the change. Everything is changing. Everything is like clouds. Everything is impermanent. We live in a dream, and there is nothing but a dream. In this case, there's resignation. There's no death. No death in the critical sense. Death as the end of the dream. If we admit that there is death, then we try to postpone it. The end is the opposite of life. Life is the opposite of its end. The way to death is not compatible with death. In classical terms, life is preparation for death. Preparation as participation in death. In the classical pre-modern world, among pre-modern people, we could say, there is no impetus, no drive to the future. Why? Life is participation in what is beyond life. We are not trying to enter into death forcefully by abandoning life. We're not trying to avoid death. When all is said and done, we're mortals. We die. The question is whether we die in a seeming way. In other words, whether we just pretend to die, and so we die physically or temporarily, and so remain within the flux of the dream, or whether we truly die. And in Shakespearean terms, true death is, of course, not merely Shakespearean, but it is helpful to think of Hamlet. True death is the death of the poet. Not a death that happens to us. We don't merely die because of circumstances that are external to us. If those circumstances were not there, we would still seek death. Now, this is a very strange thought for most of us, but for the poet, it is not. There are two types of death. Pretending to die, that is a physical death. We remain within the flux of death, of semblances. And then we have true death, where we truly are dead. And this involves a giving up. False death is about grasping all that is mortal, or all that is death, the fruits of death in the negative sense, all that is dying, all that is perishing, all that is within the dream. The poet's death is self-sacrificial. The poet gives up the life of compulsion. He dies, and as we see in Romeo and Juliet, the poet's death redeems the false death of those who do not die poetically, but merely in the flesh. So we have two types of death. So the question is whether we are or not dead. Are we merely pretending to die, or are we truly dying? Are we truly dead? True death will be the other side of the mirror, the other side of life, the otherworldly. So in this life, we participate in another world. And the poet, of course, participates through poetry. We participate in the poetic life. Well, we could be painting, we could be doing all kinds of things, but clearly linguistically mediated through abstract forms that we forge. By nature, we are linguistic. It is our nature to speak, to articulate in these forms that we bring forth, that we produce out of ourselves or through ourselves, that are produced. And so through all that we produce, or that is produced through us, we participate, we reflect back, we return in the element of reflection to the source. And the source is a womb, but it's also a tomb. Modern man has fallen into oblivion. All is a dream, and we try to avoid death itself. Life is no longer understood as participation in death. Hence, the chaos of our world. We all seek death. We all seek what is behind, what is beyond. That is death. But how? And in our modern world, we are in effect raised to try to conquer death as nature, as womb, as tomb, to conquer it through self-affirmation. Our self-affirmation is supposed to be a sign of the conquest of death. We have affirmed ourselves. We have won victory. We could go further and say, might makes right. We are alive because we have might, we have power. Or we attribute power to ourselves. And yet, tomorrow we die, or now we die. But it doesn't matter because we're building a machine that represents our collective power. And through these machines, we affirm our identities. Our identities over and against death. We conquer death by affirming a life that is the opposite of death, the secular life, the life that regards our dream as being itself